The Misadventures of an Escape Artist, Episode 9, Flying for Air Alma. In August 1980, from the age of 20, I worked 2 years as a flight instructor, but the money was not nearly enough to support my lifestyle. I closed the door on my aviation career and opened the door to the entertainment world. I spent many successful years working as a musician and actor. After 7 years on the ground, I once again heeded the call from the wild blue yonder. And so I had to repeat my flight instrument test. I passed the written exam, but the next part was actually flight training. My instructor was a grizzled old pilot named Roger Menard. He had been working as a pilot and flight instructor for Transport Canada for 30 years. I needed to take 20 hours of flight lessons in order to get my license up to date. The plane was a Seneca II, and it was old and just about ready for the junkyard, but it served the purpose. At long last, I was ready to take the Transport Canada flight test. I would be practicing blind flying, i.e. flying the plane without any outside visibility. I would only be viewing the instruments located on the control panel, since I would be wearing a special helmet with an IFR blind visor that hid the side view. This exercise allows the pilot to approach the runway in low visibility, as well as practicing being in a holding pattern. Often a plane needs to wait its turn to approach the runway. This usually involves flying away from a fixed aerial point for 1 minute, then turning 180 degrees and returning to that point. The pilot needs to do this until the air traffic controller gives the go-ahead to leave the holding pattern and carry out the approach to the runway. After passing my written and practical tests with Transport Canada, with CV in hand, I set off to visit small aeroplane companies in the province of Quebec. After 2 weeks, I had an interview with the chief pilot of Air Alma. I was hired as a co-pilot for 2 of their twin-engine aircraft, the Cessna 404 Titan and the Piper Navajo. After discovering that my license was only valid for 6 months, the Air Alma chief pilot said that, had he known this before, he would never have hired me. Transport Canada often grants a new pilot a 6-month flight permit to be reassessed after this period, instead of a 1-year license. My training on the 2 aircraft took place in October, and by the end of November, I was a professional commercial pilot with a decent paying job. My first flight as a co-pilot was in a Cessna 404, flying between Montreal and Alma. The following morning, I flew the Piper Navajo for the first time. The pilots I flew with were well worn, Captain Godet and Captain de Monti. Both had been with Air Alma for a while and seemed content not to move to larger airports or bigger planes. They were great teachers, and as a result of their guidance, I became a better pilot. I learned how to fly in difficult weather conditions like ice, freezing rain, and low visibility. This is important to know, as in the larger planes, the front part of the wing is heated to prevent ice from forming. The wingtip needs to be ice-free in order to gain lift, the force that holds the plane in flight. But smaller aeroplanes are fitted with inflatable de-icing boots. These pads are glued to the wingtips and are fashioned with inflatable rubber chambers that fill with air to break any ice buildup on the wingtips. Captains de Montigny and Coudet had shown me that timing was key in using this system. Too late and the ice would be too thick to break, too soon and the system would not have the power to work at its full capacity. Our elders have a bank of knowledge, and it would do us all good to make a withdrawal from time to time. Air Alma. I'm 28 years old and co-piloting the 8-passenger Piper Navajo prop plane for Air Alma. Captain Marc Gourmand is an experienced older pilot. The flight is between Bonaventure and Alma, 2 small towns in the northeastern part of the province of Quebec. The plane is transporting 6 engineers returning home after working in the Baie de Chaleur region. The Gaspé Peninsula is a very scenic area bordering the mountains near the mouth of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The flight took place in the early evening in December, in a snowstorm covering most of the province of Quebec and New Brunswick. The takeoff had been smooth and uneventful, and we had reached our cruising altitude of 8,000 feet. We are heading in a westerly direction over the Chic-Choc mountain range, which starts from the Gaspé Peninsula, descending southwards into the Appalachian Mountains and continuing into the Strait of Georgia. After cruising a few minutes at this altitude, all electrical systems on the plane suddenly shut down. But since we know there is a backup system, Captain Mark and I are not overly concerned. The artificial horizon, speedometer and altimeter are still operating, and the compass is able to give the flight direction. The artificial horizon indicator will enable us to fly the plane in a straight line, to climb, descend, turn right and left without ground visibility. We've turned on our flashlights in order to see the instrument panel, but there are no instruments functioning to guide the Piper to an airport and a safe landing. Assuming that the electrical backup system would eventually kick in, we remain calm. Once the system is up and running, we would regain our navigation. But when we try to activate the backup system, nothing happens, so we try again. Again, the system does not light up. We look at each other. It's not possible to descend to a lower altitude for fear of flying into the top of a mountain. But flying in our present direction also presents the same problem because of the lack of visibility caused by the snow. We realized that the chance of a safe descent was becoming less and less of a possibility. Landing safely was quickly becoming a pipe dream, literally a wish and a prayer away. After a few moments of careful thought, and by keeping our composure, we devise a plan. With the help of our magnetic compass, we will veer 180 degrees and turn towards the sea. Once over the ocean, we can always start to descend without coming into contact with obstacles on the ground. Heading towards the shore, we notice a faint light filtering through the clouds. Usually outside an aircraft, there is total darkness when flying over the mountains, and we are flying over the sparsely populated Gaspé Peninsula. The distant light is a sure sign that we are near a town on the east side of the Chic-Chocs. This means that we're above the Baie de Chaleur, which opens into the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the North Atlantic. We might be safe to descend. Finally, a glimmer of hope. But we're not out of the woods yet. Slowly and carefully we begin our descent, hoping to see the lights in the distance on the ground. We descend gradually, and at about 500 feet, the town lights are finally in sight, and the horizontal visibility is good. We're facing New Brunswick when we break through the clouds. There's an airport in Bathurst that has 24-hour landing lights. However, without the navigation charts deciphering its whereabouts, we are literally in the dark. It's often the case in many small airports that the runway lights are turned off to save electricity. In order to turn the landing lights on, the pilot has a radio frequency for this situation. The pilot presses or clicks the microphone 3 times within 5 seconds, and the lights come on for 10 minutes. Just enough time to land or take off. If the pilot needs extra time, a simple click on the microphone will turn the lights back on. But we have no radio. We decide to make another 180-degree turn and head back towards the province of Quebec. Arriving on the Gaspésie coast, we are approaching a village called Chandler, recognizable by an illuminated tower. The next town to the west is Bonaventure, the town we had taken off from half an hour earlier. We agree it is our best shot. Flying over the city, we are trying to find a road to land on. The plane will likely be a casualty, but we and our passengers would have a fighting chance. Bonaventure runs along the shoreline, and the town lights are giving us a view of possible roads. But the cables and phone poles which litter the streets greatly hamper any chance of a safe landing. Now we're going to try and land on the frozen waterfront of the shoreline. Hell, the coast is packed with blocks of ice several meters thick, so no smooth surfaces. The pitch darkness is making it impossible to go further inland to find a makeshift runway. Landing out past the shoreline is now the next option. I've always been a water baby, but landing in the freezing sea is a bit too much of a stretch, even for this moment. Suddenly we notice that the lights of the Bonaventure airport runway are on. This is serendipitous, as only a handful of aircraft would take off and land on a night out of this little town. We lower the landing gear as quickly as possible. Without electricity, the landing gear needs to be pumped using an hydraulic apparatus. Usually after 15 to 20 pumps, the landing gear will deploy and then be locked and secured in place. But even after 50 pumps, the landing gear still does not seem secure. There's a small mirror on the left engine which allows us to see if the nose wheel is down. We can see the wheel in the mirror, but don't know if it is locked in the landing position. We watch as a plane takes off and then disappears into the clouds. As we fly towards the runway, the lights go out. We now know where the runway was in relation to the airport beacon. The runway is 120 feet above sea level and 6,000 feet in length. Knowing this and other crucial landing facts, we decide to go on a long final and try to land. Slowly and with extreme caution, we descend into the darkness. This will be the moment of brutal truth. But son of a bitch, it's a no-go. The tops of the trees are brushing against the fuselage. We repeat a long descent a second time and realize that a crash is most likely imminent. Will third time be lucky? We're going to make a low pass over the control tower. So with full power, we hope that someone will know that our Piper is in trouble. Call it fate, luck, or a miracle. A mechanic happens to be working on a plane in a hangar. Hearing the Piper's engines and not seeing any light in the sky, he realizes that could be a plane in trouble, so he turned on the runway lights. We immediately made our last approach, having no clue if the landing gear is safely locked in place. We tell our passengers to prepare for a crash landing by putting their heads between their legs and kissing their asses goodbye. Humor always. The landing gear has in fact been secured, and the wheels touch down smoothly. We taxi towards the airplane parking area as if nothing occurred. After deplaning the passengers, I contact Montreal Area Control to inform them of the incident that had taken place on that stormy December evening. 45 minutes previous, this air traffic controller had watched our Piper's call sign disappear from her ATC radar screen. She immediately burst into tears upon hearing of our safe return. After a careful examination of the Piper Navajo, the reason for the instrument failure was evident. The battery had melted in half like a piece of ice in the noonday sun. It was the wrong type of battery for the Piper. We could have easily ended up in a fireball mid-flight. We also discovered that the chief engineer had removed the backup electrical system from the plane because it had been problematic. It was actually illegal to fly that airplane.